Live stream. Good evening, everyone. We are so glad that you're here for this live leadership focus here at Kyria Network tonight. I'm just going to give it a few minutes for a couple of you to log on. Oh, we were just talking as well about how funny it would be if we had a media blip tonight, and there it is, but it's out the way now. So as I give us a few minutes for the rest of you to log on this evening, I want to welcome you to this leadership focus. This leadership focus is all about leading in the media sphere. And I'm really delighted to have two of my really good friends, Tobi and also Fiona, with me. And I'm excited to be able to say that another one of our good friends, Maria Rodrigues, is going to be supplying some content tonight via video. So we're really excited that these three influential leaders that are part of the media sphere are just going to be sharing some of their wisdom, going to be sharing some of their thoughts this evening. So just to let you know, this is what's going to happen. For 30 minutes, we're just going to have a discussion about what leading in the media sphere looks like. And if, as you're watching this, you feel kind of provoked, or you've got an extra question for Tobi or an extra question for Fiona, definitely not me, because I'd have no idea how to answer any of these questions. We'd love to invite you to a closed Zoom call, which starts at 8:30. Now, that's only for 15 minutes. So if you're feeling all the way through this live, oh yeah, I'd really like to take the opportunity to ask something more of Fiona or more of Tobi, then you can just log into the waiting room and we'll be able to tell you more about that. So as we go, you'll see some of the chats in this comments, and there'll just be a reminder about how you can join into that Zoom room, how you can have opportunity to find out more about what we're going to do this evening. But yeah, Tobi, Fiona, thank you so much for giving up your time for us today. Really grateful to have this opportunity to learn more about you both and learn more about this sphere of leadership that you're both in, which is of course the media. And Tobi, I wonder if we could just come to you first, and perhaps it'd just be great for you to give a word of introduction about what your leader sphere is, and then how you came to be a leader in this space anyway.
Yeah, it's quite funny when, you know, anyone calls you.
Oh, I think you're on mute.
Am I? Can you?
It's all going off today.
Am I on mute?
What
no.
is she? Oh, can you say something, Fiona?
I can hear you, Tubby.
Today. Oh, we're back.
Am I on mute?
I'm sorry, no, there was something weird going off with my computer. I beg your pardon.
I can hear you, Tubby. Oh, okay. There we go. No worries. Yeah, no, I was just saying it's always strange when anyone calls you a leader in any space, because, you know, I very much still feel like I'm learning and growing, you know, within this sphere of media. But yeah, for people that don't know me, I am a TV and radio podcast producer. Been doing it now for a few years, but I used to be a lawyer. So I qualified as an attorney in New York. And I always sort of wanted to work in and around the entertainment and media space. And I also have been, you know, sharing the word of God, you know, alongside that, almost in parallel paths for a long time. And then I would say around 2015 was when I really started to think about, and I suppose I started to feel more an impression that actually those paths would join more in a certain way, and actually how I communicate could lend to themselves. And then I was in the space where I was actually on a secondment at NBC University, Versal, within their legal and business affairs department. And on the walls everywhere, literally like a mantra, at the time, it had this mantra saying, the content we create has the power to change the world. And at the time, I was just thinking, gosh, like that's a powerful statement. And the content they're creating is literally changing the world. I mean, Channel E, which produced the Kardashians, you know, Kardashians, anyone, sits under NBC Universal. And I just realized that, you know, I wanted a seat at that table. I wanted a seat at the table for content that I think is influencing the world. And so that's sort of how I started to take my steps into that. And then from that, the way God just really opened a lot of doors. The pivot from law to production and being a producer actually isn't as big as one would think. There's a lot of actually entertainment people, lawyers that go that way. And so I started to, you know, I had a great mentor who sadly actually passed away in lockdown, but he used to be a lawyer turned producer. I'm not a Christian. Didn't actually believe anything I believed, just, but just supported me in the most miraculous of ways, actually. And then from that, I was able to start to build my slate, and which is what I'm doing now. I have stuff in with Audible. I have, produced and commissioned documentaries on BBC Radio 4 and World Service. I also am a little bit on the mic, but not that much, on Pause for Thought on BBC Radio 2, Prayer for the Day, Daily Service. And ultimately, I suppose, in my heart, I think that media is a mountain and a space that creates content that can change the world. I think NBC, no lies told, as they say. And so I just that's sort of more what I like to do.
Wow, amazing, Tobi. I don't know how you fit all that into such young years as well. But thank you so much. But Fiona, what about you? What's your story? Who are you? How did you get into this world?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because there's lots of common threads already to it. It's really interesting. And also people who've been following these leadership things closely might be thinking, wait a minute, she's appeared somewhere before. So she's not just in media. So yeah, I came and did the arts version of this back in February, because that's been part of my journey. So I have a degree in law, randomly, not practice, but yeah, I have a degree in that. But I was in youth work for a long time, post-university, and then went off and did a degree in performance, so acting, and kind of got into writing, worked for a company that was producing online resources after drama school. And from there, I set up a theatre company, which is kind of a creative arts organisation called Foolproof. And all through that time, the radio thing has been there for me. The audio thing has been there for me. So similar to you, I've done, I do all these different things, Pause for Thought and Daily Service and Thought for the Day in Scotland. In fact, I was doing it this morning. So I was up very early this morning on Radio Scotland. And it's been an interesting thing because I think, and this might come up later on, that the imposter syndrome is quite strong, I think, on this mountain, because often you have this kind of weird portfolio career, and it's slightly opportunistic. It feels quite opportunistic, and I guess that would be advice I would give. I just keep saying yes. If I get an opportunity, it feels like a God-given opportunity, and I keep saying yes. And it's not till I look back that I think, oh, there was a random meeting with somebody back in 2008, and that led to this, and then this led to that. So there's a whole progression thing goes on. But I think for me, the other thing was lockdown meant that a lot of the live theatre stuff that I had done, so a lot of the live arts sphere that I was in kind of came to an end. And so I, like a lot of people, I had to pivot stuff onto a more digital format. So in the last couple of years, I've been doing podcasting, a lot of not producing, but presenting, and a bit of editing and a bit of jack of all trades around that. And also some TV work has come up. And again, it's come up. I've said yes. You do your best. You pray. You trust that God's going to use it, and then if that leads to something else, it leads to something else. But as I look back, there's a very clear thread of communication through all of that.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Amazing again, and really inspiring stories about how much you've both got in common, actually, but clearly the Lord's hand on the opportunities that he's given you both, and that kind of gutsy determination that we all need as leaders, of course, to actually say our brave yeses, really. And you've both referred to this in different ways anyway, but when it comes to media, we of course know that it can play a really positive role, but also a negative role in today's world. But what positive role can media play in today's world? And you've both referred to its challenges already. I mean, Fiona, I don't know if we could come first to you on that question.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. What was that phrase that we
the
change
content
the world?
we create has the power to change
the world. I love that when you said that, and it actually reminded me of a quote from a John Tyson book, and I can't remember the name of the book, but he tells a story about his little girl. I'm not going to tell the story well, clearly. A little girl, his child, waking up in the middle of the night, and they're having a nightmare, and basically the nightmare is about Mickey Mouse, and the child is saying, "But Daddy, the mouse," and he goes back to bed, and he thinks, how is it that basically something that's designed in somebody else's mind has taken my child's imagination captive?
Really?
And it's a brilliant story, because it kind of makes you think, wow, For negative or positive, media has that impact, doesn't it? It can take our imaginations captive. And so the content we produce can change the world. And that's the thing, because we have a message about a God who's incarnate, who chooses to become flesh, who that's the ultimate media, isn't it? Mediation of something, that God becomes human being. So yeah, there's so much opportunity. I guess that thing of content being king, of there's so much technical opportunity now for people to be able to produce their own content and be contributors as well as consumers. But I think some of the flip side danger of it is that we can slip into just being consumers of it. And not really thinking, how am I contributing, and really allowing the story I have as a follower of Jesus. I by that, I don't mean that you always have to be talking about your testimony. What I mean is just where is our redeemed imagination, and how is that impacting the circles that we're in, I think.
Yeah, I love that.
Answer the question, Amy?
No, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to nick that, because I love that redeemed imagination. Yeah, I really love that, because I think, we work in a creative business. Those days where I just get super stressed, I have to look, this isn't heart surgery. I have to, no one's going to die, Tobes. Like, it's going to be all right. You get so, but then you realize that actually, redeemed imagination, this is very much, missional work in some respects. And so I think that you think about, I think about shows like This Is Us, which I just adore. And, I just live it in the door, and I sit there, and at the end of it I just say, oh my gosh, like around that room they have showed, I think, redeeming stories that at least invite people to think, invite people to reflect on how they are living their life. True story, actually, was terrible to my husband one morning, really terrible, and actually was unrepentant about it as well. I thought I was right, those sort of days. and I sat down, I was doing a lot of work, and then at lunchtime, as I do, I thought, I've got a This Is Us episode, and within it, it might sound strange, but God led me to a part of scripture, and I was actually in scripture and I was like, oh my God, I read it, and I was forced, to apologize. It caused me to come to myself. It caused me to reflect on my character and I think stories from parables that Jesus used and told, you think about Jesus, he could have come down with the most complicated theology, he could have, he's God, but yet he used parables. And I think part of that was, to get them to think, part of them was to, but it was also to speak in a language that they understood. So I think that it has the power to get people to think about how they live, how we treat one another, and beyond, and think about life beyond, and all of the things that are, tenets of our faith, I think. And then equally behind that, just really quickly, I think media is such a competitive space, and such sometimes quite a dark space, that I think there's also opportunity for those Christians who work in the media to actually also be examples of light. Not that no one's perfect, to know, but I do think that it allows us to have integrity, to it allows us to share moments of ourselves, sometimes more so than other mission fields, I think.
Yeah, that's really good. Well, folks, if you're just joining this live tonight, once again, we just want to welcome you to this Leadership Focus event with Kyria. Just a reminder about who Kyria is. Kyria is a network for women in leadership to champion, empower, and release women into any sphere of influence, whether that be the church, whether that be media that we're talking about tonight, the charitable sector, etc. And we're already having some really engaging conversation with Tobi and Fiona about what are some of the positive roles that media can play, and where we see Jesus and his story come out in that, but also what are some of the challenges as well. After this live that finishes at 8:30, there is an opportunity for you just to jump onto Zoom for 15 minutes if you've got a particular question for Tobi or Fiona. And we already see that some of you are in the waiting room already, so that's great. Hang fire, we haven't forgotten about you. We promise we'll let you in at 8:30, but we do have a few more questions for you, Tobi, and also for you, Fiona. So Fiona, I wonder if I can come to you first with this next question. We've kind of addressed this already, but you may have some more wisdom as well. And that's about how we as Christians and how we as leaders can be credibly, but also creatively present in media.
Yeah, we have kind of touched on it. I think I completely agree with everything you just said, Tobi, about being a presence, actually. And that is about how we are So it's not necessarily about the content we're producing, because I think that can often be the thing we slip and think, oh, I've got to be talking about Jesus somehow for it to be worthwhile. That's rubbish. But actually the way we are within the environment, so even things like pause for thought and thought for the day, I just always think, turn up and be kind to people. Turn up and have integrity. When you say you're going to turn up on time. Act with honesty, be nice to everybody, from the door person who meets you at the door to the producer, the presenter who's the well-known figure in the room or whatever. So I think those kind of gospel characteristics are actually really important in terms of how we are. So integrity, authenticity as well. So again, that's something that can be really difficult in this sphere. If we find ourselves in situations where we're maybe having to produce stuff that we're not particularly comfortable with, but being as authentic as we can be to who we are within that sphere, and being a bit brave and honest and bold and maybe challenging things sometimes. I think there's a lot about hope. So one of the other things I do is I write poetry, and I was doing all that through lockdown, and I would hashtag it always as poems of hope, because I think people need messages of hope, and you can do that in whether that's having the conversation with the doorman when you arrive at the studio, or whether it's something you publish on your social media, whatever it is. I think hope is really important, actually. Yeah, in terms of creative output, I would say. And I go back to Andy Crouch. So Andy Crouch wrote a book called Culture Making, really brilliant book about how we can create culture but also cultivate the good that we see around us. So yeah, cultivating and creating, I think, is really, really important.
Brilliant.
Yes,
and turn up too.
I mean, these things matter. They actually do matter.
They do, especially when you're talking about our credibility. Whatever sphere we serve, these things matter, don't they? And particularly in these front-facing roles as well, when we're talking about what our frontline are, they matter more, don't they, about how we are being credible. Yeah, Toby, what would you say to that same question?
Yes, I think so too. I mean, I'll just echo it. I think it's really important. I think we can, I sort of came in with this, like, gonna wear Jesus on my chest and t-shirt, and this is it, I've arrived. And then actually you look around, you're like, actually, I could connect with people. Rather than me wanting to throw everything I believe on them, let me see where they are and let me sit with them. And I think that's what I've learned it's particularly in this space. And then integrity matters. We are inside, everyone wants a commission, I'm not any different from any other producer. I want a green light, and I think, but the ways you get there, people are watching. We don't serve them, we serve God. And I think those things matter. I had to tell an honest story actually recently. I had a really exciting project that I was so really excited about, and working with some really great people, really great talent, and it brought on a writer, which was all going, it was all as it should be. And the person that I was working with as a producer long ahead of me, but wanted to cut out the third one and only work with me, and presented me a very lovely flowery deal. And it was all, on the face of it, someone would be like, well, that's great, it's a great opportunity. But well, actually, you're cutting out a third person. And, when you're cutting out that third, and the three of us started this together, and people were like, well, commercially, it's what could work. And, actually you could add this voice, and it doesn't matter the way you answer it. You really go back to actually, what are our values? What does our faith teach us? And I'm not saying this to say, because I'm still a bit sore about it, but I did walk away from that deal because I felt in that time, actually, who are we? Are we who we say we are? And, there's no point me going in next week and say, I can't work on that project because it's against my values, but the next day I'm swiping someone else out of a deal.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't matter. So I think there's an opportunity for us to, of course, tell our stories authentically. Everyone wants to hear our stories. People want to hear the story of hope. People want to hear a redemptive story. You can authentically try and get those stories over the line, but I think who you are as you do that is what really, really matters.
Come on, this is such sound advice for those of you that are watching. We've got 10 more minutes left on this live with Toby and also with Fiona, so stay with us and do feel free to join the Zoom room for an extra question. But right now I'm just going to share screen in just a moment to introduce you to another one of our good friends, Maria Rodrigues. Maria Rodrigues is a premier presenter on the Christian radio show Premiere, and she's presented for us this just 5 minutes contribution really to this conversation that has her pearls of wisdom when it comes to working in the media sphere. So I will just switch us over to this. Do enjoy this, and then we're going to pop back to Toby and Fiona about their thoughts on this video. So do enjoy this, folks.
So it's so good to join you this evening just to reflect on what it means to, I guess, be godly in the way that we lead and do our work in the world of the media. Well, I think for all of us, we want to be a light in our workplaces. And of course, we want to be bearers of the fruit of the Spirit. But working in media has some specific challenges. So using the acronym TRAP, T-R-A-P, I'm going to share some thoughts of things that maybe we want to consider to avoid getting into the trap of being poor witnesses in the workplace and in the way we lead. So the first letter, T for trap, is truth. Now, of course, Jesus himself said, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." And we know that truth is really important for followers of Christ. But sadly, the world of media, whether you work in digital, print, radio, TV, film, has had a really bad reputation in the area of telling the truth. We've had the phone hacking scandals. We've had newspapers being sued. It's not a good situation. So I think we as Christians, if we're working in the media, we have a particular call to be upholders of the truth. You know, sometimes it can be so easy to cut corners and say, "Oh, I'll just stick this bit of music in, and maybe I haven't paid for the royalties, or we'll just, put that photo in, not quite sure where it's come from." Or we hear the phrase clickbait, don't we? Where people write headlines to try and get people to read an article, when actually the headline's not really anything to do with the article. So I think a challenge for us if we work in media to consider how we are upholders of the truth. And the second letter, R, is for regulation. What do I mean by regulation? Well, you might be the most gifted person in your field. Maybe you're going to be the next Mrs. Pixar, or perhaps you'll be the next Kate Adie reporting, in dangerous scenarios. But actually, you could be an amazing, gifted person in the field of media. But the most important thing is character. How are you treating your fellow colleagues, the people you're managing, the people you're working with, the producers, the presenters, the interns? That is where the rubber really hits the road. Regulating ourselves. Are we really in that fast-paced media environment where there are so many pressures and deadlines, getting caught up in a sense of maybe even competition? Or are we just pausing, imagining Christ with us, saying, "Okay, Jesus, as I make this decision, as I say this thing to this person, am I honouring you?" And it reminds me of a story you may have heard of somebody in their workplace. They were new, and their boss asked them to lie and cover up something. And the person said, "Well, I'm not going to do that." And after that, of course, the boss knew that that was a person who could be relied on. So regulate ourselves. Are we matching up who we are in the world, in the workplace, with who we are at home? I think sometimes in the media, there is a lot of pressure, a lot of different views on everything from Brexit to sexuality and much more. Are we getting swept up the pressure, or are we staying true to who we are and just regulating how we're treating people in that environment? So the next letter is A. So if you're working in media, chances are that you're there because you feel God has called you to be there. But I mentioned there are a lot of pressures. There are often deadlines for press releases, for news bulletins going out, or articles to be written, or film scenes to be edited, whatever it is you might be working in. There is a lot of pressure and a lot of deadlines. And so when there's that pressure, that's when some of our weaknesses and our insecurities can come to the surface. So our attitude, be mindful of our attitude towards others and how we respond in difficult, pressured situations. I always try, if I can, to just remember that I never know what someone else is going through. Somebody that I'm a bit frustrated with in my workplace and my work environment, when they get home in the evening, maybe they're dealing with the challenges of caring for elderly parents. Perhaps they're suffering in secret with some kind of sickness. Maybe they're battling with something we just don't know about. So our attitude is something I think really it's important to check in the world of media. So much fast-paced deadlines. Just think about whether or not we're communicating Christ to others. And the final one, the trap, is P, prayer. Now this seems like an obvious one. Of course we all want to undergird everything that we do with prayer. But I work in a Christian media organisation, and even there are so many different views represented. And unless I start my day each day by praying for the people that I would encounter, the people I mix with, the people I work with, I know we could get into all kinds of trouble. Prayer changes atmosphere. Prayer changes an environment at work. And where more so we need it in the world of media. We're trying to communicate messages and ideas, and that's where we want the Holy Spirit to be at work. And I remember one time I sat next to someone in the office, and we had very, very different views. It could have made for a potential big storm. And so I took it to prayer. And when I was praying, a Bible verse came to mind. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to print it out, put it on their desk, and say, I've just printed this out just to bless you. It turned out that was the person's, unbeknown to me, favourite verse in the entire Bible. So don't underestimate the power of prayer. Whether you're working in a secular media organisation, a Christian media organisation, prayer can change things. If you know God has called you there, then seek Him, because He's got a plan and a purpose for you being in that environment.
Wow, great stuff from Maria Rodrigues there. And just that simple way of thinking about that word trap there: truth, regulation, attitude, and prayer. Toby, any reflections from what Maria just shared there?
Yeah, I love that. I just echo all of it. I think the idea of prayer is just, it seems so simple, but yet so powerful. And I think, this is so interesting because we work in an industry where we believe creativity changes things. And, but prayer, as we speak prayer out into the atmosphere, we know what that means, we know what it does for us, but we know what it does for the environment. And so that we're walking into. And so, I just, for that, and I feel like sometimes that's our secret weapon as well. That's like, you're not going in alone, sometimes you go into, I know I definitely do. I'm about to go into rooms and I'm like, oh God, I've got to speak to these execs, Lord, what do I say? And it's like, I've gone before you. It's that reminder that actually he's with us always. And so, I agree. And I love that sort of like, integrity again. But I love it when she went down to like royalties, especially like indie producers like me. I'm like, oh, where can I slip in a little track? I'm not like, gosh, I'm not there yet, Lord. But actually, it's so true. What you do with little, what you'll do with much. So, no, definitely.
Yeah, good stuff. What about yourself, Fiona?
Yeah, I loved it. And I've written it down to remember it. But I think I was also thinking about the fact that it's certainly on the front face of this industry, it's very superficial. There's a lot of narcissism. There's quite a lot of vanity. There's a lot of, you need to be aware of yourself and aware of how you present and all of that. And that can really eat away at your sense of identity and your sense of value. And so I think that sense of integrity and prayerfully giving glory to God, and just giving glory to him in the morning and the evening, it's about you, Lord. It's not about me. And because that needs to be a defense. And I think the other thing around that is about that, again, coming back to that thing of how we treat other people. It's a competitive environment. It is a place of a lot of narcissism, and it can be really hard, because you're up against competing worldviews and so on. But when we invite God into that, it's kind of hard to pray for somebody and then cut them down. And I guess with also, I think the thing about praying for Christians in the media and praying and encouraging Christians in the media, I think as I've got older, I'm just quite aware of the opportunities I have and the opportunities I have to kind of open the door a bit for people coming after me, and just trying to encourage that and not feel threatened by that, because it's an environment where you can feel very threatened by people around you. So super encouraging from Maria.
Really good. Yeah, I agree. And two things that stood out for me, I think it was the start and the end, actually, the importance of truth, particularly in this cutthroat world of, what's the truth and what's the tale, that kind of stuff, and really asking for God's wisdom to know how to cut through this sphere well as we handle this in any of our leadership scenarios and settings. But equally, that last one as well, of what it essentially looks like to, I guess, be people that are continuing to not just build upon that truth, but also people that are just continuing to build that culture of prayer. And I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was Deborah Green, who runs Redeem in our communities, and she was talking about the importance of praying for the media sphere. And she told this story about how initially, when the BBC was created, it was created, and you can still see it today, with a plaque on its wall in the official London buildings that said, "May this broadcast be to the glory of God."
Yeah.
And we look at our media now, whether we talk about the BBC or any other channels for that matter, to be super fair. And there is a mandate on that broadcasting channel to actually say, may it be something that brings glory to God, good news, redemption, hope, life. And actually on all channels and a lot of spheres of media, whether you look at social media and you look at other things, can we honestly, truly say that? And so the importance of prayer for this sphere is so key, isn't it? Because it's a message that's going out to the world. And we as Christians hold that hope that can redeem and change some of that. So we've got one more minute and one more question for you both, if that's okay. Those of you that are watching, this is your final reminder. If you would like to join the Zoom call now, you can see that on the chat below as you're watching this live. Just click into the waiting room now. Somebody's in there already. You've just got 15 minutes to join us in this Zoom room. You may have another question for Toby, another question for Fiona, or a prayer request as well. You might be finding that you're quite interested in this sphere, or you're witnessing this sphere and some of the joys but the challenges that brings. We'd love to be able to pray with you. But as we just start to close this live, and Toby, I'd love to come to you first. I wonder if you've got any kind of further encouragement or advice that you'd want to offer leaders that are already in this sphere, thinking about moving into this sphere when it comes to media.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind, I would say, is you're not alone. There are Christians in this space everywhere. And I know that in your day-to-day, it can feel like it's only you, but one, God is with you. But two, actually, there's an army of people who also, share the same faith, still believe in the same Lord as you. And, Christians in media as an organization, reach out, would really want to almost challenge and encourage you to go and connect, because iron sharpeneth iron. And then this journey, it helps when you're, up against someone else, and you can say, I need whether it's advice or a shoulder to cry on some days, it can, anything, it can really, really help. But the second thing I think I would want to encourage leaders in this sphere is remember who you are. Yeah. Remember who you are and whose you are, and, the finished work of Christ, who you belong to. It isn't the greatest accolade, whether that be the BAFTA or whatever it may be. It isn't the rejection, from the mountaintop to the valley. You are not it, you are not what you create. You belong to Christ. And He is our reward, and when you start your day and you remember and you finish your day like that, you shut your laptop, and I open my laptop knowing that He is my reward, and I shut the laptop at the end of the day and He is still my reward. And I just think that changes everything, and you just go into your space with that truth. Great,
thanks, Toby. And yourself, Fiona?
Yeah, I was thinking about this before we came on here. I kind of feel it's like a bit like being shrewd as a serpent, isn't it? I think develop a thick skin. You're going to have to develop a thick skin, especially in the early days. But you've got to keep a soft heart. So it's like thick skin, soft heart was the thing I was thinking about. Keep a soft heart towards people around you. Keep a soft heart towards knowing who you are. I think that's so key. And then the other thought I had, which might encourage somebody watching, is keep making your own work. So, I talked about the imposter syndrome thing at the beginning. Sometimes it feels as though you kind of want somebody to find you and discover you and pick you up and, make you start. It doesn't work like that. So keep making your own work, keep going, persevere, really, and keep trusting God leading you into that, I think,
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah, of course, Toby.
When you talk about making your own work, and collaborate.
Yes.
I think collaboration is kingdom anyway. And actually it's what creatives do so well. Like, reach out and collaborate. You'll be so surprised, what can come together when two people come together to make something. It is beautiful. So I would definitely encourage that.
Does that mean we can look at like a kind of Toby, Fiona, collaboration mashup?
Yeah, definitely.
I would love that. I'd like to add one more that I just feel nudged to add before we stop this live. And thank you to those of you who are in the waiting room right now. We see you. We're looking forward to having an extra chat with you any moment. But I was just thinking about so many men and women, but particularly women, historical, biblical, and even now, who are misrepresented. And we all know the pain of that, don't we? I think probably the three of us have all got our stories about what that looks like, and particularly you two in the industry that you're in. And I guess I would want to give some encouragement and also some advice to recognise that God sees us when we're misrepresented, but also to recognise that on the flip side of that, as we've gone through that valley, how we then can also ensure that we're not doing the same, and that we're encouraging and thinking and having an attitude and a mind of Christ, so that we can be bearers of light and we can be the witnesses of the truth. And so, I think about so many Old Testament, New Testament historical women that have had to stand in the face of lies, adversity, negativity, just trash being said, spoken, spread about them, but they've still stood, and they've stood core and, you know, strong in the confidence of that core and confident in whose they are, like you said, Toby. So maybe we want to offer a line of prayer for you guys tonight. If you're feeling like that, may you know the God who loves you and is close to you this evening. Maybe you don't even know the Lord, but you're watching this and just thinking, gosh, yeah, I feel misrepresented at times. Know that there is a Lord who deeply loves you, created you, considers you valuable, worthy and precious. So our time is over. We're 5 minutes over, but we've had such a lovely chat. So I'm going to stop this live stream now. This is the last moment for you to jump on the Zoom that you'll see there in the chats for one more, maybe two more questions for Fiona and Toby. But thank you. Thank you to our contributors this evening. Thank you to Maria for that excellent advice that she brought to us earlier on. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Fiona. And thank you, those of you, for watching this evening. And we'll say goodbye. Bye.
Mm-hmm.